Good morning, adventurers. My name is Ben, and welcome to a morning show where I sit around, drink some tea, and talk about D&D. First up for T&D today, we have a new mug again. This one is one that says, I can fix it. And the tape measure, if you look very closely, goes the wrong direction. That's not how tape measures work. But I still think it's kind of fun. My fiance got it for me for my birthday, and I enjoy it. Even if the tape measure is backwards, it's still a fun little mug. Inside of it, we have some Tension Tamer from Celestial Seasonings. I am severely dehydrated right now because the water has not kicked inside of my body, even though I just had a absolute... I lost the word I was trying to say. I had like 2 full bottles of water out of my big old water bottle on my way home because I was working outside in the heat and it was dehydrating. Whatever, not the point. But I have a headache, so I'm hoping that this will help cut that back a little bit. And also, I just really like the Tension Tamer. Not super important, because what we are talking about today is actually kind of on theme with the whole I can fix it mentality. You might be thinking it's Artificers. You would be wrong. It is not Artificers. Instead, we are talking about innovation in your Dungeons & Dragons game, your 5th edition game, really kind of any system for the most part, because one, I wanted something that kind of went on theme with this mug for the first time I was using it, and 2, I was watching the DMs of Exandria Roundtable that Critical Role posted, I think last week now sometime. I'm not done with it yet. I only got a certain way in before I had to go to work, but I did get to the part where they were talking about innovation in 5th edition, and I think that's a really important thing to talk about. Nobody really talks about it, nobody really thinks about it, and so I wanted to go ahead and talk to you guys about it a little bit here, because it is something that I care a lot about, and I think is super important to actually talk about. So let's talk about it. I don't know what I'm doing. So let's dive in, shall we? First things first, what do I mean when I say innovation in a 5th edition game? When they were having their roundtable, I believe it was Brennan said specifically that time doesn't make sense in most D&D games because you are very often dealing with some like legendary thing that happened 3,000 years ago. The best thing ever made was made 3,000 years ago. So are like blacksmiths okay today? Like, what are they going through it because they just can't possibly hope to match people who were their great times 100 grandparents? Like, what's the deal with that? And that is something that makes a lot of sense to me. Like, why would you want all essentially like forward progress to have stopped in the ancient past? And that was more of a general critique that they were making of like fantasy as a whole, because Matt has done a lot of work to try and introduce continuous innovation into Exandria as a whole through his 3 different campaigns, and to give justifications for these sort of setbacks that they have been finding themselves in as they've gone forward here. And so I wanted to hop on that train and talk about that. So innovation can look like a few different things. It can look like innovations in magic, in the way that it's used, in the way that it's implemented, in the way that people are actually interacting with it. Maybe more and more spells are being discovered, created. New ways to use magic are being found every single day. It can be a whole list of things like that that really change the way that magic is introduced in every single game. In terms of technology, I know that a lot of people have some issue with introducing like firearms into their campaigns, but I personally don't have any issue with that. I very much think that it's a cool thing to introduce. If you're going to have somebody have the ability to pull meteors from outer space and throw them at people, I don't see why you couldn't make a pistol, given the fact that essentially black powder technology is an ancient kind of technology by today's standards. Like it is something that happened way in the past in terms of modern day standards. So there's no reason that it shouldn't be able to be accessed in your 5th edition game, in my opinion. Matt Mercer, obviously. Matt's gunslinger class that he built for Campaign 1 of Critical Role is actually a very well done example of how to create a gun-based character in a 5th edition game in such a way that it doesn't get crazy overpowered like a lot of the homebrew ones do. And people always talk about, well, I mean, what? As soon as you introduce a gun into the game, they're just going to try and shoot somebody in the head. Well, the same kind of logic applies to it in that, like, if somebody says, oh, I'm going to try and slice off their head with my sword, well, the other individual involved in this conflict has the ability to react to stuff. If they see this crazy weapon pointing at their face, they're going to get out of the way, similarly to how they might duck or throw up a shield if, you know, a giant sword is swinging towards their neck. Like, you can have that and still be connected with it. More than both of those things independently, my favorite is the Magitech, like, fusion that a lot of times you find in fantasy and a little bit of sci-fi, but mostly in fantasy, because I think that Magitech is the best of both of those worlds. The ability to create things by utilizing both mechanics and magic is something that I think is really, really fascinating, really, really cool, and it is the way I believe that the world would operate, given the opportunity to have magic actually introduced into it and be able to be used in these different ways. On TikTok, I made a video a while back that ended up doing pretty well about just creating a movie theater in 5th edition. Like, all you have to do is have somebody be able to cast Programmed Illusion, where the trigger for the Programmed Illusion is the illusion right before it, and you just lay out this full long, essentially, chain in the same area, and you can create this movie in there. And why wouldn't you? It would take you, you know, a year to create a movie or more, but once you do, it can just play forever with no overhead cost other than the upkeep of the building that it's in, assuming you do it in a building. And so just the creative use of magic and technology in that kind of way is really, really something that I'm a huge proponent of. And I kind of want to get into that a little bit here. So obviously, I just talked about the way in which you could just, like, use mundane spells to create these really, really cool things. You can do that with a lot of different things. You can enchant a box with prestidigitation to create a washing machine, or a dishwasher, or I guess a dishwasher is still a washing machine in this particular instance because it is a machine that washes things. And it just is something that, you know, it makes sense. And just because you have all of this fantastical magic to utilize in these ways doesn't mean that you can't also be using mechanics to help augment that. It takes a lot of power to, you know, fully fuel something based entirely on magic in a certain way. Like if you were trying to create a car or something like that, trying to power the entire thing via magic exclusively, that is going to be a laborious kind of thing. But if you can enchant something to essentially set off little fire bolts or little, like, sparks or something like that, and still utilize the same general mechanics of the way a car's engine actually works now, you've set yourself up in such a way to where you are not having to constantly be tapping into this massive pool of magical energy, but you still get the same result. So being able to essentially create pistons that drive the different components of an engine via magic, and then the mechanics therein following that, it makes it so that you are able to do these incredible things with a much smaller, essentially, overhead cost. I know it's an actual, like, pay up kind of cost, but it is a smaller investment in terms of you don't have to be a 15th level wizard in order to do these things. You could do that at, like, level 4 or something like that and really start to make a name for yourself. And that is helpful if you are trying to populate your world with some kind of technology advancement, magical technology advancement, that kind of thing. Because the reality is that commoners are level 0, and the really big, crazy people most of the time won't get past level, like, 4. There's not... The point of D&D really ultimately is that there aren't that many people that can go face to face with the dragon and survive, and potentially even kill the thing. So the fact that there are not going to be these adventurers everywhere in your world actually kind of helps sort of bolster that idea that innovation is driven by a few people in this context, and it can be for good or for, you know, evil. They can be somebody who is trying to create automobiles and make them affordable for people so that the world can become more interconnected, or it can be somebody who is trying to make automobiles in order to strap cannons to them to go terrorize towns. There's nothing stopping you from doing both of those things. Honestly, they could be competing enterprises if you really wanted them to be. And so utilizing the innovation itself with a different sort of context surrounding the individual creating that innovation really helps inform and drive the way that the story can go with regard to that innovation. Additionally, innovation in games, be it magical innovation, technological innovation, or magitechnological, there we go, innovation, using any of those can be a major plot hook in your game. If there is something that somebody has done and the players need to figure out how to stop it, they need to be able to do this research, figure out the way that it works, and really sort of come up with a solution that doesn't just necessarily involve punching it. Or if they need to create some kind of machine to stop what is happening. Maybe there is some kind of comet coming towards wherever your world is set, and they need to figure out something that can turn the comet around and send it back the other way. And oh no, there don't happen to be any 17th level wizards hanging around that can call Meteor Swarm and try and redirect it so that those hit the comet and blow up the comet instead. Maybe that's just not a super common thing that happens, because why ever would it be? And so they need to come up with a way to essentially create a ground-to-air missile or a laser or something that will blow out the comet and make it stop coming towards the planet, and they'll save everybody and be heroes. You know, just shooting from the hip here. That's an insane kind of storyline, but you could run it if you wanted to. That one would actually probably be a lot of fun to run with some Spelljammer-esque kind of stuff. And that's the other thing. Spelljammer is coming very, very soon, which means that we are going to be looking at interstellar travel, essentially, with regard to magical technology, which is going to be super, super cool. And, of course, as always, you don't have to put anything like this in your game. You don't have to. It's up to you. It's your game. But I personally think it's a lot of fun to put that in there. And so when Spelljammer comes out, I'm going to be looking at it really, really intensely and seeing how I can take it and adjust it. Technological advancement is also a really, really good way to show the passage of time over the course of really any amount of time. Any significant amount of time, I should say. In my home game, I am going to be setting most of my games, if not all of them, moving forward in the same world that I have been building, because I've spent a lot of time on it. I really love it. I think that it has a lot of meat to it that is open to being explored, all that sort of thing. It is a functional world that I think is really cool. And if I set a campaign 40, 50 years down the line, then if there is suddenly a walking mountain or something like that that wasn't there before, it is due to some kind of advancement that has happened in those years. Maybe it's an evil wizard guy who has awakened a mountain. Like he amplified the Awaken spell using some kind of apparatus that allows him to sort of harness, focus, and expand the arcane energy that he's using. Or maybe it's some crazy inventor that went, man, wouldn't it be cool if I could move that mountain over to the side there? And they went ahead and they built giant crab legs underneath it and had it walk away. So technological advancement can be something, if you are running multiple campaigns with the same or multiple consecutive campaigns with the same crew in the same world, it can show that things have been happening since you went ahead and had that last sort of adventure, that last window. That's what I'm looking for, that last window into that world. And it's a really, really great tool for that. And honestly, ultimately, if you feel like you suddenly are too far ahead, you have gone past the point of no return, you think you really need a hard reset back to like fantasy Dark Ages kind of thing, because suddenly your players are building raccoon-shaped spaceships that they want to go to Trash Planet on, hit them with some kind of mega disaster that will wipe out magic, lock it down, change the way that the world functions, shift the arcane ley lines all across the world so that they are in a different configuration, and people have to relearn how to harness this energy. You are, if you're the GM, you're the one running the story. You have every ability to just go, we're going to undo that and just wipe the slate clean with stuff. Or if you think, well, I like where we're at, but this one thing is just, it's a bridge too far. Wipe out that one thing. Get rid of the one person that knows how to do it. Get rid of, the random little thing that is making your life a little bit harder. It'll provide an interesting plot hook, ultimately, which is, quite frankly, what you want. Because as Brennan Lee Mulligan said, I'm lazy. And so you can go ahead and just take stuff that you don't necessarily like and turn them into plot hooks so that your players will pursue those. And then the story kind of writes itself for a little bit. So, ultimately, use innovation, use technology, use techniques, use magic, use all of it in your game because it's so, one, it's so cool. Two, it's really fun to come up with this kind of stuff. And three, it shows progression of time, it shows progression of things. And if your players are the ones on that cutting edge, it makes them feel really, really amazing because they are the ones that are discovering this thing. Most of us in our lifetime will not be somebody that discovers some crazy big thing. If your players get to be that person, you're doing it right, honestly. So go ahead and implement those things in your game because they're great and you should be using them. Honestly, they're a lot of fun. So moving on from that to the shows that we have coming out today and tomorrow. We have today Dimension 20, Knocked Prone, Venture Maidens, Trials and Trebuchets, and Roll Out. And then tomorrow, Thursday, we have Critical Role, of course, Authors and Dragons, NADPOD, and LGBT D&D. Please go check them out. Let them know that I sent you. Most of those are bigger streams / shows, so maybe it won't have as much of an impact. But hey, maybe somebody will see the little thing flying by in chat saying, "Oh, it was sent here by the Barnell Creative," and that would be funny to me. So please go ahead and let them know that I sent you because, again, it will be funny to me at some point. But that is everything I have to talk to you guys about today. So thank you very much to my patrons. Hang on. I skipped one. Thank you so very much for making me part of your morning routine. I really do appreciate it. And thank you so much in particular to my patrons. You guys are the ones that make this show possible. If you're interested in becoming a patron, there's a link in the description of this episode. But as I mentioned, that is everything I have for you guys today. So without further ado, don't forget, everybody, drink tea, play D&D, and keep on rolling.